In the calm heart of a suburban neighborhood, lined with perfectly identical houses and meticulously trimmed lawns, a quiet man named Jason lived a simple, eco-conscious life. He wasn't the kind to cause trouble. His world revolved around balance, a balance between comfort, sustainability, and peace. His grey two-story home sat near the cul-de-sac, surrounded by others that looked almost the same, except for one detail. Jason cared about the environment, and that passion was about to ignite a firestorm of conflict. It started on a bright morning when he completed the installation of solar panels across his roof. The sleek black panels glimmered beneath the sunlight, blending smoothly into the roofline. To Jason, they weren't just a personal achievement, but a statement, a way to live responsibly and cut down on rising utility bills. The hum of clean energy filled him with pride. He could already imagine the satisfaction of watching his power meter spin backward, the sunlight paying for itself. But in a community where conformity was currency, change was the enemy. The Homeowners Association, the ever-watchful HOA, was quick to notice. A letter arrived within days, printed on thick paper and sealed with bureaucratic authority. It accused Jason of violating aesthetic standards and visual harmony. The panels, they claimed, were ugly, an eyesore visible from the street and out of sync with the community's visual identity. Jason had lived there for years without conflict. He paid his dues on time, kept his lawn trimmed, his mailbox polished, his garbage cans hidden precisely as the rules required. But this letter changed everything. The tone was harsh, the deadline short, and the fine severe. They demanded immediate removal of the solar panels, or face escalating penalties. As the sun fell over the neighborhood, Jason noticed the growing tension. Neighbors whispered, some sympathetic, others annoyed. Karen, the HOA's vice president, was the loudest voice of disapproval. Her home, positioned directly across the street, had a clear view of Jason's roof, and she had decided the panels were ruining her curb appeal. She called them reflective, disruptive, and out of character with the neighborhood's traditional charm. For the first time, Jason felt unwelcome in his own home. His once peaceful evenings became filled with the anxiety of HOA notices and passive-aggressive comments. Each new letter grew more aggressive, threatening legal action and daily fines until compliance was achieved. Weeks passed, but Jason refused to surrender. He researched state energy laws, discovered homeowner protections for renewable energy, and learned that in many regions, HOAs couldn't simply outlaw solar panels. There were limitations, yes, but outright bans were often illegal. The more he read, the more determined he became. Still, the HOA persisted. They called emergency meetings, circulated pictures of his house as a violation of neighborhood harmony, and hinted that if one person was allowed to break the rules, others would follow. Their fear wasn't about aesthetics, it was about control. The pressure mounted as Karen and a few board members began walking by his property more frequently, jotting notes on clipboards, taking photos from the sidewalk. Jason tried to stay calm, but it was impossible not to feel like a criminal in his own driveway. When a final warning arrived, a threat of legal action and property lien, Jason knew the conflict had reached its breaking point. Instead of backing down, he called a lawyer. The situation was no longer about a few panels on a roof. It was about rights, fairness, and standing up against a system that bullied homeowners under the guise of neighborhood standards. As autumn leaves began to scatter across driveways and lawns, the HOA prepared for what they thought would be an easy victory. But Jason had prepared something stronger: proof, documentation, and law on his side. The stage was set for a battle far greater than anyone in the cul-de-sac had ever seen. The courtroom air was thick with tension when Jason finally faced the HOA. What had begun as a neighborhood complaint had evolved into a full-fledged legal battle, one that drew the attention of local media and even nearby communities. The case had become a symbol of resistance against overreaching HOAs. In the weeks leading up to the trial, Jason's life was consumed by preparation. His attorney, a calm yet sharp professional specializing in property and environmental law, guided him through the maze of regulations and statutes. They found what they needed: a state law that specifically prohibited HOAs from banning or unreasonably restricting solar panels. The key word was unreasonably. It was the legal shield Jason needed. The HOA, however, was stubborn. They doubled down, claiming that their objection wasn't about solar energy itself, but about the panels' placement and appearance. They insisted that the panels created glare, disrupted the community's architectural uniformity, and would lower property values. Their argument was dressed in the language of order and beauty, but underneath it lay personal vendettas and inflated egos. Karen, always poised with self-righteous energy, became the face of the HOA's crusade. She spoke passionately at meetings, painting Jason as a rebel, undermining the integrity of the neighborhood. Some residents sided with her, fearing the wrath of the HOA or the possibility of fines themselves. Others quietly rooted for Jason, admiring his courage but avoiding open support to stay out of the conflict. As the hearing date approached, tensions reached new heights. Jason found his driveway occasionally blocked by anonymous vehicles. Someone left a note on his door reading, "Follow the rules or leave." Even his garbage cans were mysteriously overturned one morning, small acts meant to intimidate, but he refused to break. The courtroom proceedings were slow and methodical. Both sides presented photos, reports, and written testimonies. The HOA's representative described the panels as shiny intrusions that disrupted the visual unity of the neighborhood. Jason's attorney countered with photographs proving the panels produced minimal glare, expert assessments demonstrating compliance with local ordinances, and a firm citation of the state's Solar Rights Act. Over days of hearings, the facade of HOA authority began to crumble. The judge, methodical and unimpressed by emotion, focused on facts. Were the panels installed safely? Yes. Did they violate any explicit community covenant about renewable energy systems? No. Were they structurally sound and aesthetically reasonable? All evidence said yes. Meanwhile, the neighborhood itself started shifting. As news spread of the trial, residents began questioning other HOA policies, the fines for mailbox colors, the restrictions on lawn furniture, the endless obsession with conformity. Jason's stand had inspired something unexpected: quiet defiance. By the time both sides rested their cases, the courtroom felt like a pressure cooker waiting to explode. The judge requested final written submissions and adjourned for deliberation. Outside, reporters waited for comments, while neighbors whispered about potential outcomes. Jason returned home exhausted but hopeful. For months, his life had revolved around this fight, every waking hour spent proving he wasn't wrong for wanting clean energy and independence. The once proud HOA, led by Karen, still strutted through the neighborhood as if victory was inevitable. But deep down, even they could sense the shift. Their authority, once absolute, was beginning to crack. The law was no longer on their side, and everyone knew it. The morning of the verdict arrived with a calm breeze sweeping through the neighborhood. The leaves shimmered, sunlight danced on rooftops, and on Jason's solar panels, gleaming like silent sentinels of resilience. When the judge's ruling was released, it spread faster than wildfire. The decision was clear and unequivocal. The HOA had overstepped its authority. Their actions were deemed unreasonable, their fines invalid, and their enforcement attempts unlawful under the state's renewable energy protections. The court not only sided with Jason, but ordered the HOA to pay his legal fees. The impact was immediate and seismic. Neighbors gathered in driveways, whispering the news like gossip turned revolution. The HOA board, once powerful and feared, fell into silence. Karen's confident stride vanished, replaced by quiet embarrassment. She avoided eye contact in public, her clipboard now absent, her voice subdued. The HOA's authority had been checked by something greater, the law, and one man's courage. Jason, though vindicated, didn't gloat. His victory was not about revenge, it was about principle. He had endured sleepless nights, financial strain, and social isolation. But in the end, justice had prevailed. He stood outside that afternoon, feeling the warmth of the sun that had started it all. The court's decision set a precedent, not just for him, but for other homeowners. News articles labeled him as the solar man who beat the HOA. Environmental forums praised his courage. Even local energy companies cited his story as an example of resilience. Slowly, change began to ripple through the community. The HOA, forced to amend its bylaws, included new clauses protecting renewable energy systems. Homeowners who had once been afraid now began installing their own solar panels, emboldened by Jason's success. The cul-de-sac that once punished innovation now reflected progress, roofs gleaming with panels that absorbed the same sunlight that had once caused so much division. Karen eventually resigned from her position on the board. Her reign of control ended quietly, without ceremony. Her name faded from the newsletters, her influence dissolved into memory. The new HOA president was more reasonable, advocating for community flexibility rather than rigid conformity. Jason, meanwhile, found peace. The sound of birds, the shimmer of his panels, and the sight of his reduced electricity bill filled him with quiet pride. The conflict that had nearly broken him had, in fact, transformed the community. The sun, once the symbol of dispute, became a symbol of renewal. The neighborhood thrived again, not because everyone looked the same, but because one man had dared to be different. The lawns still gleamed, the mailboxes still matched, but now, atop the rooftops, the panels glimmered like badges of progress. As the light faded over the cul-de-sac that evening, the golden reflections of the solar panels mirrored something deeper, the enduring truth that sometimes, standing up for what's right, not only changes rules, but enlightens everyone around you. The HOA said his solar panels were ugly. The court said otherwise. And in the end, so did the sun.